What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and over the last few weeks, I have been talking to you about Nunzio De Phillips and Christina Weir's new X-Men run. And this is a volume, New X-Men Hellions. It's a 4-issue miniseries that happened shortly before House of M, and this is basically just a little side volume that kind of focuses on the Hellions a little bit. Up until now, in the new X-Men books that I've talked about, basically they've been very antagonistic toward our main characters. They haven't really been fleshed out very much. Not all of them are especially bad characters. They're not mean necessarily. Some of them are a little bit mean. But this book really gives us a chance to explore them as characters so that they're not fulfilling the role of being a heel or being the villain in the comic, which is the role that they were playing whenever they were in the new X-Men ongoing series against the New Mutants, who were the main characters, the good guys. And so this story is very simple. They're all going to California to spend the summer at Hellions' house. Julian Killer, his parents have this huge mansion, and before they even get there, they get in trouble at the airport because the security guards are basically like, you guys are mutants, you're not getting on a plane, and so they kind of pick a fight with the security guards, and then they're able to get to California, but then Julian's parents are like, you've dragged our name through the mud, we are disinheriting you. And so Julian pitches a fit, and then they find out that his parents, they actually got all of their fortune and basically everything that they have from a guy called the Kingmaker. And the Kingmaker, basically, he gives you a wish, anything that you want, and then you have to do something for him in return. And then the plot of this miniseries is he is giving each of the Hellions something that they want, and then they have to do something for him, and then they have to decide, is this something that they're actually willing to do? Are they all willing to make a deal with the devil in exchange for their heart's desire? And this is a really good vehicle to flesh out some of these characters, because some of these characters had been fleshed out before. Dust, she had already been kind of handled quite a bit in Grant Morrison's new X-Men run. She had already been fleshed out about as much as she is here in that book. Her heart's desire is just to be reunited with her mother. And then you have characters like Kevin Ford, who he's fleshed out about as much as he always was in De Phillips and Weir's New Mutants series. He has a death touch, and he accidentally killed his father with it. And the Kingmaker is able to hook him up with the Beamtech cure, which was introduced in Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men. And it's weird because the cure in that run is played as, once you take the cure, you're permanently cured and you don't get your mutant powers back. But here it's played as, you have to take this pill twice a day, and then if you stop taking it, your powers return. So it's very different than what was introduced in Whedon's run on Astonishing, but it's the same name of the company, Beantech, so, or Benetech, I don't know how it's pronounced, but that's Kevin Ford's wish. And basically, I would say the characters who are the most fleshed out here is Santo, Rockslide, and Brian Cruz, Tag. Up until this point, neither of them had really been very fleshed out at all in the New Mutant series. Rockslide was always played as kind of a jerk and basically just Hellions' right-hand man. Here we find out that he's just a normal dude, and he just wants to join the superhuman wrestling tournament. I don't remember what it's called, but he wants to wrestle against other superhumans. And that kind of makes him just a teenage version of the Thing, who for a little while, I think, worked as a bouncer for an organization very much like this, with superhumans wrestling against each other. And then Brian Cruz, his heart's desire is he just wants all of his friends to stay friends. He's afraid that if they all get their heart's desire, they're all going to stop hanging out with each other. And he wants them all to keep being friends with each other. And that made him probably my favorite character in this whole book. But I would also say that Julian Keller is fleshed out quite a bit here, which in the New Mutants run, he is always kind of flip-floppy. Sometimes he's played as very Draco Malfoyan, very mean-spirited. He says really mean, cruel things to most of the New Mutants, and the only one that he's really nice to is Sophie Mantega. And then sometimes he's played as being almost a human being. He's not very mean at all. In this book, he's very much understanding of all of his friends and their wishes and desires. He's very friendly towards Mercury, very friendly towards Dust. When Dust is like, you know what, I don't think that we should do this, and he says, okay, how about this? We all get to sample the Kingmaker giving us what we want, and then we can decide if we want to make a deal with him and be his servants, more or less. And she's like, you know what, fair enough. And so he's not really the voice of reason because he's the one who wants to make a deal with the Kingmaker, probably the most out of all of them, but he's kind of weighing the options. He's listening to what Mercury and Dust have to say, and then he's listening to what Kevin Ford, who very much has a reason to want to make a deal with the Kingmaker, he listens to what he has to say. And it makes Hellion more of a rounded out character. He's not just the scumbag leader of the Slytherin team that he was played as in the New Mutants series. And he was played a little bit less one-dimensionally than that in New Mutants, but here I think that is taken further. I think he is even more fleshed out than he was in that run. Honestly, I don't have much to say about this book. Whenever you hear the premise of it, that these guys all have the chance to make a deal with the devil, metaphorically anyway, the Kingmaker, as near as I can tell, is just a normal dude. He doesn't have any actual supernatural connections or anything. They metaphorically have the chance to make a deal with the devil, and then they all have to decide, are we going to do it, or are we going to back down from this? And it's one of those situations where he says, you either all do it, or none of you do it. And in that way, it reminds me of in the 1980s when the New Mutants were stranded in Asgard, and some of them wanted to stay. Wolfsbane had fallen in love with a wolf prince, and she wanted to stay, but then some of the others really hated it there, and they didn't want to stick around. And then it was like, okay, you can either all stay in Asgard, or you can all go back to Earth. It reminds me a lot of that, and I feel like that's kind of a cheat, that's kind of a cop-out, just so that we can return all these characters to status quo, which is unusual because after this book, the status quo is completely upheaved anyway. Right after this, you get House of M, where all the X-Men books and even some of the non-X-Men books are put into an alternate reality, and then after that, you have less than 300 mutants on planet Earth, and a few of these characters all get killed and depowered, spoilers for the new X-Men comics that follow this. So it's very strange that they felt like they had to return these characters back to the school and back to being on a team together. I almost think it would have been more interesting if the Kingmaker said, okay, those of you who don't want to make a deal, you can go home, and those of you who do want to make a deal, you can stay here. I think it would have been neat to see, do all of them decide to go back to Xavier's, or does Brian Cruz decide to stick around and become the next Kingmaker, or does Kevin Ford decide to stick around and permanently lose his powers, or, he probably wouldn't permanently be able to lose his powers, because then he'd have to be working for the Kingmaker, and he would need his powers to do that, but you know what I'm saying. I think that would have been interesting, if we could have seen what all of these characters would choose to do, if they could each make the choice separately instead of having to make the choice as a team. But as is, I think this is a really great vehicle for exploring these characters. It's only 4 issues long, so it's not a really in-depth exploration of all of these characters. But I think some of the characters who had already been fleshed out a little bit in the New Mutants run, they are fleshed out just a little bit more, and some of the others who really hadn't been fleshed out at all, they are fleshed out quite a bit more. And I think that it's a really great look at these characters who, up until this point, I had only ever seen them as one-dimensional, mean bad guys. And they're not quite that anymore as of this story. So I personally really like this book, and I would recommend it if you have been reading DePhillips and Weir's New Mutant series and you want more, but you weren't sure where else you could get some of those characters. Well, here's a book. You don't get any of the main New Mutants characters, but you get some of the side characters in their own story. So I would recommend this book if you're into this creative team and you are looking for more stories from these guys in the X-Men world. So those are my thoughts on New X-Men Hellions. I hope that you guys liked this review, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be doing some other videos throughout the week, so be sure to check those out as well. In the meantime, I will see you guys in the future. Have a great rest of the day.